Imagine the single most powerful person alive. He commands the largest army on earth. His face is stamped on every coin, and a word from him can raise a city or end a life. Now imagine that at the end of a long, exhausting day, in a cold military tent on a frozen frontier, that man sits down by candlelight, not to write laws, not to boast of his victories, but to argue with himself. Quietly, privately, he writes little notes, reminding himself to be patient, to stop complaining, to expect that tomorrow will be full of difficult people, and to be a decent human being anyway. He never means for anyone to read them. There is no audience, no publisher, no title page. Just a tired man trying to talk himself into being good. That man was Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and those private notes survived by accident to become one of the most quietly revolutionary books ever written. This is the story of that diary and of its single, world-changing idea: that peace is never in your circumstances, but always in the judgment you lay over them. Master the one small kingdom of your own mind, Marcus discovered, and the whole chaotic empire outside it loses its grip on you. The book is called Meditations, and it was written somewhere around the year 170, in Greek, by a man who was at the time the Emperor of Rome. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and he was the closest thing the ancient world had to a philosopher king, a ruler who genuinely wished he could spend his days thinking and teaching, but who instead spent most of his reign at war, freezing on the Danube frontier, fighting off invasion after invasion, burying children, and holding a vast, fractious empire together by sheer patience. He belonged to the Stoics, a school of philosophy that taught a simple, bracing idea: that we do not control what happens to us, only how we respond, and that a good life is built entirely out of that second thing. And here is what makes this book unlike almost any other work of philosophy ever published. Marcus was not writing a treatise. He was not lecturing anyone. He wrote these notes to himself, for himself, as spiritual exercises, reminders scratched out at the end of hard days to keep his own mind steady. That is why the very first move he teaches is a morning ritual. He tells himself, "Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial." Read that again and feel how strange it is. The most powerful man in the world begins each day by bracing for the worst in people, not to give up on them, but so that no rude word, no betrayal, no ingratitude can ambush him. He rehearses the disappointment in advance, and by doing so, disarms it. Here is the whole book in a single sentence. The most powerful man alive wrote a private notebook to talk himself into being good, and its one relentless message is that your peace of mind is never determined by what happens to you, but by the judgment you choose to place on it. So if you can master the small kingdom of your own mind, the entire chaotic empire outside it can no longer touch you. Everything in Meditations orbits that one discovery. Marcus keeps circling back to it from every angle, the way you return again and again to a truth you know but keep forgetting. That between the world and your suffering there is always a step, and that step is your own opinion. Change the judgment and you change the experience, not by pretending pain away, but by refusing to add a second, self-inflicted layer of misery on top of the first. We will walk his notebook in 5 beats: the secret diary itself, the morning brace, the discovery that life is opinion, the fortress hidden inside your own soul, and the long shadow of death that Marcus used, strangely, to make each ordinary day feel precious. First, the secret diary. It is almost impossible to overstate how odd this book is. Nearly every great work of philosophy was written to be read, to persuade, to teach, to win an argument. Meditations was written to be forgotten. Marcus jots to himself in fragments, repeats himself, contradicts himself, scolds himself, and returns obsessively to the same handful of ideas because he has not yet mastered them and knows it. There is no system, no grand structure, no reader in mind. He addresses himself in the second person, thou, thyself, a man standing over his own shoulder, coaching the tired ruler back to his principles. And the setting matters. Much of it was written on campaign, in army tents on the Danube frontier, in the middle of a brutal, years-long war against Germanic tribes, while plague swept through his legions and the empire strained at every seam. This is not a comfortable philosopher in a sunny garden. This is an exhausted, grieving, overworked man, surrounded by flattery and betrayal and death, reaching for the only tools that could keep him upright. And that is precisely why the book has outlived empires. Because Marcus was not performing wisdom for anyone, he was using it to survive, in real time, the hardest job on earth. When you read Meditations, you are not reading a lecture, you are reading a private struggle, the actual sound of a good man arguing himself, night after night, out of despair and back toward his duty. The intimacy is the whole point. Nobody was supposed to be here. You are reading, essentially, the most powerful person in the world talking to himself in the dark, and finding, in his own mind, a resource that no army and no crown could give him. Second, the morning brace. Return to that ritual Marcus sets himself at dawn, because it is one of the most useful things in the whole book. He does not wake up and tell himself, the day will be wonderful and everyone will be kind. He does the opposite. He warns himself, plainly, that he will meet the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, the envious, the unsocial. And then he gives himself the reason it does not need to ruin him. These people act badly, he reminds himself, because they cannot tell good from evil. But he himself has seen the nature of the good and knows that no one can truly harm him or drag him down to their level without his consent. There is a second, even more famous line he uses to get out of bed at all, on the mornings when he simply does not want to face the work. He writes, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being." Not the work of an emperor, notice, the work of a human being. Getting up to do what you were made to do, the way a vine is made to bear grapes. Now feel how modern this is. This is the ancient version of everything we now call preparing for difficult conversations, managing expectations, not letting other people live rent-free in your head. When you rehearse the disappointment before it arrives, when you assume, calmly, that some people today will be selfish or rude or petty, you take away their power to ambush you. The rudeness still comes, but it cannot blindside you, and it cannot pull you down into being rude in return. Marcus is not being cynical or bitter here. It is the exact opposite. He braces for the worst in people precisely so that he can keep choosing to treat them well anyway, so that no single bad encounter can turn a whole day sour or turn him into someone smaller than he wants to be. Third, and this is the heart of everything, life is opinion. Marcus states it in 4 unforgettable words. The universe is transformation. Life is opinion. Sit with the second half of that. Life is opinion. He does not mean that nothing is real or that facts do not matter. He means that between any event and your suffering about it, there is always a hidden step. The judgment, the story, the verdict your mind stamps onto the raw fact. The event itself is neutral. Someone criticizes you, that is just sound in the air. You lose a position, that is just a change in arrangements. The pain, the humiliation, the despair, those are not in the event. They are in the opinion you add to it. And because the opinion is yours, it is the one thing in the whole situation you can actually change. This is, quite literally, the foundation of modern cognitive behavioral therapy, the most evidence-backed form of talk therapy we have, written down 1800 years before a single clinic opened. The whole method of CBT is this. It is not the event that disturbs you, it is your belief about the event, and if you examine and adjust the belief, the disturbance loses its grip. Marcus got there on a battlefield, by candlelight, with no framework except the desperate need to stay sane. He tells himself, again and again, that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your own estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That is the great liberating hinge of the whole book. You cannot control the insult, the loss, the traffic, the illness, the betrayal. But you always hold the pen that writes the verdict. And the moment you realize you are the one writing it, you stop being merely a victim of what happens and become, at last, the author of what it means. Fourth, the fortress inside. If your peace lives in your judgments, then your judgments are a place you can retreat to no matter what is happening around you. And Marcus makes this beautifully explicit. People are forever looking for escape, he notices. A house in the country, a villa by the sea, a holiday in the hills, some external place where they can finally rest. But he sees through it. He writes, "Men seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores and mountains, and thou too art wont to desire such things very much. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men, for it is in thy power whenever thou shalt choose to retire into thyself. Nowhere, he insists, can a man find a retreat more quiet and more free from trouble than in his own soul." This is the idea later Stoics would call the inner citadel, a fortress built not of stone, but of your own settled mind, one you carry everywhere and that no enemy can besiege. Think about what that means for us, drowning as we are in the modern promise that peace is somewhere else. The next vacation, the next purchase, the next city, the next relationship, the quieter life you will finally have once things calm down. Marcus, who could have had any villa in the empire, says flatly that the escape you keep chasing is already inside you, available in any moment for free. The problem was never that your surroundings were too loud. It was that you never learned to go inward and shut the gate. And the practice is not grand or mystical. It is simply to withdraw, for a moment, into the one place the world cannot follow you, your own capacity to judge, to reason, to choose your response, and to remember, from inside that fortress, what actually matters and what is merely noise. Fifth, and finally, death, which sounds like the darkest of the 5 beats and is, strangely, the most life-giving. Marcus thinks about dying constantly. He reminds himself over and over that he will die, that everyone he knows will die, that emperors and beggars end in the same dust, that even the greatest names are soon forgotten. To a modern ear, this can sound morbid, even depressing. But for Marcus, it does the opposite. He writes, in a line that has echoed for 2,000 years, "Thou mayest every moment leave life. Let this determine every act and thought." He is not being gloomy. He is using death as a lens that brings the present into unbearable focus. Because if this ordinary afternoon could genuinely be your last, then the pettiness dissolves. The grudge you were nursing, the status you were chasing, the insult you were replaying, all of it shrinks to nothing beside the plain miracle of being alive right now, able to think, to act well, to be kind. This is the ancient practice the Romans called memento mori. Remember that you must die. And Marcus wields it not as a threat, but as a gift. Death is what makes the ordinary sacred. It is the frame that turns a plain moment into the only moment. He tells himself to do every act of his life as if it were the last, and to accept whatever comes with a calm and grateful mind, because a good life was never a matter of how long it lasted, but of how it was lived. And so the book that spends so much time on dying is, underneath, the most fiercely alive thing imaginable. A running instruction to stop postponing your real life, to stop waiting for conditions to be perfect, and to be fully, gratefully present in the single ordinary day you have actually been given. So what does all of it add up to? Marcus Aurelius, from inside the loneliest and most powerful job on earth, arrived at a conclusion so simple it is easy to underestimate: that almost none of your suffering comes from the world, and almost all of it comes from your judgments about the world, which means the one lever that can change your entire experience is a lever only you can pull. He braces each morning for difficult people so they cannot ambush him. He reminds himself that life is opinion, so that no event can wound him without his permission. He retreats into the fortress of his own soul instead of chasing peace across the empire. And he keeps death always in view, not to darken his days, but to make each one blaze. Put those 4 moves together, and you have a complete operating system for a human mind under pressure. One that has kept working, unchanged, for 18 centuries, through wars and plagues and exiles and prisons, because it does not depend on anything going right. It depends only on the one thing you always control. The world will do what it does. Circumstances will rise and fall, people will disappoint you, plans will break, and one day it will all end. Marcus knew every bit of that better than most, and his answer was not to fix the world, but to master the small, unconquerable kingdom of his own responses, and to discover there a freedom that no crown ever gave him and no army could ever take away. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Tomorrow morning, before your feet hit the floor, try Marcus's oldest exercise. Say to yourself calmly that today you will meet at least one person who is rude or thoughtless or ungrateful, and decide right now that you will not let it turn you into someone smaller. That single act of rehearsal will quietly take the sting out of half the frustrations of your day. And then, when something goes wrong, because something will, catch the moment your mind reaches for its verdict, and pause in the gap Marcus spent his whole life pointing at. The gap between what happened and the story you are about to tell about it. Remember that the event is neutral, and the suffering is the opinion you are adding, and the opinion is yours to revise. You do not have to feel crushed by the traffic, the criticism, the setback. You can set the raw fact down and choose a steadier judgment about it. This is not about pretending everything is fine or forcing a fake smile. It is the opposite of denial. It is the deeply practical realization that you have been handing away your peace to circumstances that were never entitled to it, and that you can, starting today, take it back. Master that one small kingdom, the space between what happens and what you decide it means, and you will find, as an exhausted emperor found on a frozen frontier 1800 years ago, that the whole chaotic world outside it loses its power to own you. Marcus Aurelius never wanted you to read this book. That is exactly why it is so trustworthy. There is no pose in it, no performance, no wisdom for sale, only the private, honest sound of a good man at the end of hard days, teaching himself to be better one more time. He ruled the largest empire on earth, and the thing he was proudest of controlling was not a border or an army, but his own mind. If this walk through meditations gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we travel to the wild Yorkshire moors and Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. The story of a poor, plain orphan who refused to trade her dignity for love and walked away from the man she wanted in order to meet him one day as an equal. And tell me in the comments, what is one judgment you have been adding to your life that you are ready, starting today, to set down?